Morning, everyone. Welcome to this combined exec member decision session. Just to note at the start of the agenda, I'll be chairing for the first few items up to item number 6, and then Councillor Kilbane will take over for items 7 and 8. We don't have any apologies for absence. Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Great. Next item is minutes. The minutes of the decision session held on the 20th of May and the decision session held on the 1st of July. Anybody got any corrections to the minutes? Then we'll sign those at the end. Next item on the agenda is public participation. We've just had apologies from Councillor Fisher, who was due to speak on agenda item number 6. He's been unavoidably detained. So then we have Flick Williams, who wants to speak on agenda item number 7. Flick, as you know, you have 3 minutes.
I'll start by agreeing wholeheartedly with the Director of Public Health. Tackling long-term, let's call it absence from the labour market, is complex and requires a multi-component approach. Economic inactivity is a government misnomer for what would certainly raise objection and is more accurately termed unproductiveness within the paradigm of a capitalist economy. Because the backdrop to this is a slow but sure dismantling of the welfare state, the new narrative is that the value of human beings is centred solely around productivity. Work will set you free, but what is missing from categorising work as both a health benefit and inequality reducing measure is the substantial evidence that for many, low-paid precarious work leads very directly to worsened physical and mental health. And let's not forget the very significant numbers of people now disabled with long COVID acquired from lack of precautions in the workplace. I have no doubt that many will benefit from the proposed schemes, and that is to be welcomed, but I make some observations. First, driven by central government's Get Britain Working agenda, we have a confused mishmash of different groups targeted, and all too often NEETs are used as cover for those with much more substantial barriers to labour market activity. This whole programme of schemes was arrived at back to front. Instead of asking people desperate for work what support they would like, the Mayor gathered together service providers to bid for money to deliver schemes they wanted to offer, and some are more useful than others. For example, early retirees. All my university peers had retired by age 60 because they were financially secure enough to do so. For those less fortunate, I am unclear how a roadshow to help individuals assess their current work and life situation really helps those who only continue to work out of sheer economic necessity. If you are not a veteran, a care leaver, a NEET, a caregiver, or transitioning from education with an EHCP, in other words, someone who is in receipt of long-term incapacity benefits with chronic ill health, the only scheme for you is supported pathways, which seems to be a choice between archaeology on prescription or construction skills training, all particularly physical. The programmes listed for employer engagement are particularly welcomed but lack detail. Asking people to overcome barriers to engagement is a failure to understand that most barriers are outside the control of the individual as per a social model understanding, because this also takes place against a backdrop of swinging cuts to the tried and tested Access to Work programme, which is directly leading to existing disabled employees losing their jobs. Finally, the hurried creation and rollout of these trailblazers, diverting funds from valued centralised support, is to enable government to claim new practical support as it slashes benefit entitlements and blame mayors when targets go unmet. Thank you.
Thank you, Flick. And I'm sure your comments will be taken into account when that item is dealt with later in the agenda. We'll now move on to item number 6, the application for the community right to bid under the Localism Act 2011. And I'm going to hand over to Nick and Graham.
Thank you, Councillor Lemas, and good morning. This report sets out a proposal to list the Fox Inn, Stockton-on-Forest, as an asset of community value. The application has been provided by the Campaign for Real Ale's York branch. Our legal services team have confirmed that the applicant organisation meets the eligibility criteria in the relevant legislation and the application form. Details of the application are set out in the report and the attached annex. My colleague Graham will provide further details on the property.
Thanks, Nick. The Fox Inn has a new owner, the Fox and Forest Limited, and they have advised that they fully support the ACV application and have no objections to it being listed as an ACV. When the Fox Inn was previously open, CAMRA advised that it was a fully inclusive venue, encouraging families to visit and serving food 5 days a week, with discounted meals for older diners and also offering a takeaway service. The Fox Inn hosted a weekly quiz attended by regulars and non-regulars, and also put on occasional music events for villagers. The venue was a meeting place for parent-teacher committee, the village hall committee, the Women's Institute, fishing and cycling groups, a petanque club, and a venue for the Stockton Players Amateur Dramatic Society. There was a regular darts team and also regular dominoes evenings. Sky Sports was to enable locals to gather and watch major sporting events. The application meets the criteria for listing. Therefore, it is recommended that the Fox Inn should be listed on the ACV register. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. And in making my decision, I also note that Councillor Fisher, who was due to speak, has passed on that he is fully supportive of the application as well. That being said, it's important to consider all of the contributions, and I note that the owners are also very supportive, and their communication confirms that. I also know how important local pubs are, particularly in villages where there is often a lack of other infrastructure, and where they form community hubs and places for all of those wonderful activities that you've listed to happen. So the recommendation on page 20 at item 6 is that I approve the listing of the Fox Inn Stockton on the Forest, and I'm very happy to do that for all the reasons contained in the report. So thank you very much. And I'll now hand over to Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks, Councillor Lomas. We'll move on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is the York Economic Inactivity Trailblazer. Who's going to speak to this paper? Okay, if you want to introduce yourself, Jonathan, and then fire away.
So I'm Jonathan Byrne, Interim Head of City Strategy and Partnerships, and I'm presenting the report today on York and North Yorkshire Economic Inactivity Trailblazer grant acceptance. I'd like to thank the Chair and executive members for considering the report. Today we're asking you to formally accept funding worth £1,038,250 from the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority under the government's Get Britain Working programme. This is part of a £10 million fund. Overall, the funding will enable City of York Council to deliver and/or commission a broad range of schemes targeted at supporting residents who are currently economically inactive, particularly those experiencing ill health, disability or caring responsibilities, into good jobs, volunteering opportunities and other forms of positive economic activity. The proposed suite of schemes has been developed rapidly and in close partnership with our voluntary sector, health partners and other local authorities, and is designed to deliver maximum benefit in a single financial year. It is pragmatic, targeted and focused on those with the greatest barriers to employment. We are aware of delivery risks, especially around short timescales, recruitment and intensive data requirements. However, there are mitigations in place, including stage payments in arrears, active engagement with providers and ongoing discussions with the DWP regarding data expectations. No funding will be drawn down without formal legal data protection and procurement assurance. This programme aligns directly with our economic strategy 2022 to 2032, the health and wellbeing strategy and our overarching council plan commitments, especially around equalities, affordability and tackling health inequalities. The recommendation for approval is that members are recommended to accept the funding worth £1,038,250 from the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority to deliver and/or commission the individual projects and schemes set out in the paper as part of the Economic Inactivity Trailblazer programme. approve that City of York Council enters into a grant agreement with North Yorkshire Combined Authority for the above funding, and delegate authority to the Director of Public Health in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and the Director of Governance to negotiate and conclude the grant agreement and any modifications and extensions, commence and conclude any compliant procurement processes in line with our contract procedure rules and the Procurement Act 2023, and negotiate and agree any onward grant agreements or financial assistance to third parties, ensuring compliance with the Subsidy Control Act 2022. The reasoning behind this is to support economically inactive residents back into employment, improve public health, reduce inequality and enhance affordability, to ensure compliance with the relevant legal frameworks that I've outlined earlier, and to enable timely and effective delivery of schemes within the single year funding timeframe.
Thank you, Jonathan. Gary, anything you want to add to that?
If you can introduce yourself, Phil. I apologise. Gary Taylor, Director of City Development. Just getting used to this new tech. 7 months in, I should be used to it by now. Just to address some of the comments made, obviously, I can't reference in terms of the political elements, in terms of the changes in benefits, but in terms of the our intentions, and very much highlighted in the report, the intention is to focus in on good jobs. I accept that some of the content in here is vague. That's because the pace we're having to move. The funding was only made available this year, and we've had to align the programme largely against existing programmes with extension of the works that were undertaking. But we're already engaged with potential employees in and around our charter, etc., in terms of how we can work through a pathway in terms of good jobs. And I totally accept the comments in terms of individuals, in terms of poor jobs, and their not wanting to engage in terms of that marketplace, who would want to in that respect. We would have very much, and we do intend, if there is further funding available, and we have allowed some scope in here in terms of co-designing across the sector, not just working with those people that commission, but those people that engage with this activity, and also beyond that. So there will be some scope in here, and we're bringing some resource in with the hope that there is further funding in and around this area that actually is delegated to us and is actually not confined with some of the national DWP programs, so we can actually target and develop those programs in and around our people. And in terms of the hurried rollout, it's a program that we've had to work with. It's not how, if we'd have had more time, we would have, again, very much liked to co-design this approach. But just from our perspective, we very much will be engaging throughout this process with the hope that there is additional funding. So, take all your comments on board in that respect.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Steele-Halshaw, would you like to say anything to this paper?
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. Yeah, just to say a few things. This investment in our area will tackle a real pressing challenge, which is inactivity due to ill health. And this is a shared vision for an inclusive and supporting those who want to be supported into work. This fund is about engaging and supporting those who've been unable to volunteer or work due to various forms of disability, or because they're unpaid carers. It'll be there to provide a route into employment and also work with employers to create inclusive workplaces that value wellbeing and diversity. When systems such as health, skills and employment are joined, people are less likely to fall through cracks. The 1 million, well, just over, that's been invested in York will support people to be independent and empower people to be able to have an active part in communities throughout voluntary community and social enterprises. This isn't dismissing the fact that we are aware that many, many people who are not working are already massively involved in voluntary and community issues. And we know the challenges people face are complex. Long-term illness and mental health conditions and musculoskeletal issues have driven a 72% rise in economic inactivity in our region since 2019. But we know that with the right support, people can and do thrive. The Trailblazer Fund gives us some tools to make that happen. Throughout the 15 identified schemes, people can receive tailored support that best suits their needs, and tailoring systems to a person's individual needs means that success is far more likely. Employers will receive support throughout the fund to help them create inclusive and healthy workplaces, such as tailored support to manage long periods of sickness absence, and they'll also receive support around inclusive workforce development, such as support for adaptations for those with additional requirements in the workplace. I'm really looking forward to seeing how these initiatives and programmes operate across the city, creating healthier outcomes for people, including increased contact with people and reducing isolation, which for me is a huge benefit of work. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Steels-Walshaw. Very little to add, really. Most things have already been said. I would like to thank the officers for pulling this together. Peter Roderick in particular, who's not here, who's done quite a lot of work on this too, along with Jonathan and Gary and Councillor Steels-Walshaw. The turnaround was very quick for any normal organisation. For a local authority, it was super fast because we've got to get this money out the door by April. And I guess in some respects, you know, this does look like an absolute no-brainer of a decision. Somebody says, do you want over £1 million to help support some of the most vulnerable people in York? We're very unlikely to say no. And we will gladly accept the money. But I think it is fair to ask the questions that Flick Williams has been asking about how this money will be spent and where it's being aimed. I think it reminds me of back in the 80s, there was a business guru called Mike Peters who basically made his money by writing business self-help books and talking at big conferences. And I remember seeing a video clip of him, and he's talking to an audience of CEOs, senior directors, you know, what used to be called captains of industry type audience. And he said, I believe in the UK, he's an American, he said, I believe in the UK, you have people who phone in work, say that they're not coming in because they're sick, and they're not really sick. And the whole audience went, hams. To which he said, what kind of jobs have you created that people will phone you up, lie to you, risk losing that job because they can't face coming into your workplace? To which there was stunned silence across the room. And I think it's really important that we keep concentrating on that people will go into workplaces that are suitable for them, where they feel valued and where they can actually get on with doing their job. Some of this money will be going towards making sure that we encourage employers to provide those workplaces. We will stick to the social model of disability for anybody watching or listening. That means that people are disabled by the society that they live in, rather than anything to do with themselves as individuals. And we will be trying to make sure that workplaces are accessible to all. So I think just on that note, and I think it's also worth saying at this point that the York Labour Group's opposition to the cuts, to the welfare cuts through PIP is well documented. In fact, hopefully we played a small part in having some of those decisions reversed. So we will continue down that path. We will accept the money. So on the recommendation at paragraph 8 on page 50, to accept the 1.038250 from the combined authority. Happy to accept the money with all of the caveats and conditions that Jonathan has expressed, but perhaps more importantly, we'll keep the focus on how do we make sure that everybody who is able and willing to work is able to do so, and that barriers are not put in their place, and we'll do all we can with the money that's available to tackle those barriers. And with that, I'll move on to item number 8, which is any urgent business. I've not been notified of any. No urgent business. No. In that case, I will bring the meeting to an end and thank everybody for their contributions.